Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Good Monsters podcast, where we will take a critical look at modern Christianity and Christian culture. My name is Cody Lawrence. I'm a former youth and young adult pastor and a current seminary student with lots of experience in churches and with modern Christian culture, and I and the Bible have a bone to pick. Stay tuned. In this introductory episode, I'd simply like to briefly tell my story and give you an idea of what this podcast is all about. So here we go. I've called myself a Christian as far back as I can remember. Like a lot of people, I grew up in what I called a Christian home. I went to church every week, and that was about the extent of my faith up through high school, until I started wondering what I was being taught was actually true. I asked questions and I didn't always get satisfying answers. I started having serious doubts about if Jesus really did come back to life, if the Bible really is a reliable source for history, and if the things inside of it really happened, if God even exists. So, I searched. I studied, I read books, both by Christians and atheists. I studied the thoughts of a lot of different religions, and I finally came around to believing that classical Christianity was true, that Jesus, God incarnate, was born on earth to live, die, and come back to life in order to save us from our brokenness and reunite us with the God who created us and loves us. But it wasn't that easy. I was surrounded by people, especially through school, who didn't only not share my beliefs, but hated Christianity. And I see them to this day in the world, and they're everywhere. I still couldn't get satisfying answers during this time and support from the Christians around me, like they weren't equipped for these things. But I wanted to be equipped, because I thought if Christianity was in fact true, then it should be able to hold up against these challenges and against these questions. There had to be satisfying answers. I wanted my beliefs to be as unclouded as possible by emotion and unbiased by my experiences and solely based on the evidence, at least as much as I could. That approach seemed so novel to me at the time, because so many people around me, they answered the question, why do you believe in Christianity with, well, that's what I've always believed, or because my parents believe that. Someone even answered me when I asked them, what reasons do you have to believe that Christianity is true, by saying, I don't need reasons to believe that Christianity is true. I just need faith. And to me, I thought that was ridiculous. I also stumbled upon apologists at the time, like Greg Koukl and William Lane Craig, who took a rational approach to Christianity and made me not feel so alone in the world. Later on, I would see my friends graduate and drift away from their faith. I'd hear awful statistics about something like 50% of Christians leaving their faith after high school. I saw more and more people criticizing Christianity based on the problem of evil and how a good God wouldn't allow evil to exist in the world. People who call themselves Christians and grew up exactly like I did, going to church every week, not coming out on the same side of doubt that I did. They were losing their faith while I went through the exact same kinds of doubts and asked the exact same kinds of questions as they did. But they lost their faith and mine became stronger. So I continued thinking about that through the years, and then I started becoming more involved in church. I was volunteering, doing studies with people, teaching some. And after I graduated college, I moved overseas to be a missionary, and I lived in Japan for a year. And after that, I moved back to the States, and I became a youth and young adult pastor. And if you've spent a lot of time in a church, this next thing I'm going to say won't really surprise you. I've seen and had worse experiences inside of churches than I have anywhere else. There are terrible people in churches doing terrible things. Now, not all of the people in churches, but they exist. They exist more than I would imagine that they should exist. They seem to even exist more in, say, like secular businesses or secular jobs. There are people who are willfully blind to bad things that are happening in churches in positions of power within them, and they choose to do nothing, for example. Among people who are supposed to be followers of Jesus Christ, there's gossip, and there's arrogance and closed-mindedness and unwillingness to change. I think lots of Christians have it all wrong. Or others are probably too immature to know that what's happening is wrong and that they should do something about it. That's exactly, in my opinion, why people end up leaving their faith, or at least one of the reasons, a major reason. Because most people's faith was exactly what mine was. I just went to church every week and had a very surface level relationship with God. I think it was a real relationship, but it was surface level. I didn't know how to grow, and I wasn't told how to either. Christians today stop being Christians because of other Christians, because of how they're treated in church, because of the lack of their teachers and the church's ability to equip them to stand up with the challenges of the world, and it's awful. I wanted to close with a passage from Luke chapter 6. I'm going to start at verse 43 and read through 49. This is Jesus teaching. He says, "For no good tree bears bad fruit, nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit. For each tree is known by its own fruit. For figs are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor are grapes picked from a bramble bush. The good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaks. But why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I tell you? Everyone who comes to me and hears my words does them. I will show you what he is like. He is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when a flood arose, the stream broke against that house and could not shake it, because it had been well built. But the one who hears and does not do them is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. When the stream broke against it, it immediately fell, and the ruin of that house was great." So the purpose of this podcast is to confront Christians, myself included, with the very real and very serious problems in our faith that are destroying our relationships with God and destroying the church and allowing streams to break up against our houses and ruin them. And we have to stop letting these things happen as Christians. It's our responsibility and it's our duty. See you next time on the Good Monsters Podcast.